This is some interesting news right here. Promoter Eddie Hearn revealed Anthony Joshua's return date for fight with carefully chosen opponent. Anthony Joshua has never missed a calendar year in his professional career, which started in 2013. He fought every year. In 2020, he fought once at the very end of the year, but he did fight in 2020, fought in 21, 22, etc. He won't be fighting this year. He won't be fighting in the calendar year of 2025. Anthony Joshua, I'll read this article here from TalkSport. Anthony Joshua won't be thrown back in at the deep end for his next fight. According to Asia's promoter Eddie Hearn, the former unified heavyweight champion of the world, will face a carefully selected opponent in January or early February before one last roll of the dice next summer. Joshua hasn't stepped between the ropes and suffering a crushing defeat to Danny Dubois last September. The expectation was that the Watford powerhouse would return in 2025, but Joshua isn't rushing back to the ring after recovering from elbow surgery. We've got to choose carefully for the next fight, and I think the best way in I think the best way in all of this is just to be honest and say the next fight will be a comeback fight to build into a roll of the dice fight next summer, Eddie Hearn told Sky Sports. We need a top 15 guy next. It's not going to be Fury, Usyk, or Dubois. All of those guys are top guys. We need someone that AJ can come back from in a competitive fight after being out for what will be over a year and get himself ready for what will be one last roll of the dice. A defeat now at this stage of his career would be devastating to those plans, so we need to get it right. Joshua has been in talks in a bizarre crossover fight against Jake Paul next year. However, Paul doesn't fit the billing of a top 15 heavyweight. Well, he certainly doesn't fit that, but I think it was more down to the networks. Obviously, AJ has that lifelong deal with the DAZN. He shares with the DAZN, so as I think it was even Jake Paul who said that was the issue. Hearn stopped short of revealing potential opponents for his client, although the target for AJ's summer blockbuster remains the same. Right now, all that's in my mind in an ideal scenario is to fight Tyson Fury next year. That is the big focus, Hearn added. From a common sense perspective, the fight has to happen in 2026. But common sense and Tyson Fury don't always go together. Never a truer word spoken, Mr. Hearn. Never a truer word spoken. He's got to get back. He's got to want to come back. It's a personal decision. I think the minute you try and persuade him is where it probably goes wrong. You've got to let him do his own thing when he's ready, and if he's up for it, you'll know about it. I think that's the feeling that the fight will happen, but we've been here so many times before, and if you start trying to guess what Tyson Fury is going to do next, it starts to become very confusing. On a roll here today, Eddie Hearn. Yeah, can't argue with that either. Good Lord, I don't even want to try and think what's going on in there sometimes with Fury and what, yikes. But if he's going to come back, I don't see what else you can come back for. I don't think he'll go straight in for AJ. Hopefully, he can get his comeback fight in early 2026, and then we'll have ours, and then we can finally get it on, but who knows? Those are the words of promoter Eddie Hearn. Right, let's just dissect this article really quickly. Surprised that Joshua's not coming back this year? Yes, I thought for sure we would see him back probably in a Christmas show or something like that. January, February is not much later, but still, it's weird that he's choosing to wait until early next year rather than the calendar year this year. It is a strange one, I have to say. When he says top 15, but then he's saying, well, we're not going to go into names and stuff like that. Okay, what does that mean then? Because, Eddie Hearn has done this before, right? And I understand it from a promotional point of view, but I find it very disingenuous at the same time. Where he has said with said fighters, we're going to get top 10, top 15 opponents. He's done it with Conor Benn in the past, when Conor Benn was early in his welterweight run. But he always named names, and he always kind of shot himself in the foot because he would say it's going to be a top 10 opponent. Really? Yeah, we're thinking Chris Algieri or Robert Garcia or Victor Ortiz, or not Robert Garcia. I was trying to think someone who was trained by him as well. But you know what I mean? He's talking about obscure top 10 fighters of the past, right? At that stage in their career, they're now obscure. And people are like, well, I mean, they're not top 10. So I think Eddie Hearn is probably not actually looking at the top 15 at heavyweight. He's probably looking a lot further down and just hoping maybe that one of them has a top 10, top 15 ranking with a sanctioned body. Maybe. That's what he's probably looking at. If I look at who he could potentially, like, that top 15, right? Richard on box rec anyway, right? Chisora, would he beat him? Yeah. Could he beat Richard Torres Jr.? Probably. Richard Riakporhe? Yeah, I'd have him over Richard Riakporhe. Richard Riakporhe's the same age as Anthony Joshua. That's crazy when you think about it. Could he beat Bacoli? Maybe. Hunter? Yeah, probably. I would. Hrgovic? Don't know. Gassiev? Probably. Then we get into kind of the upper echelons. Well, then when you go further down, you're like, Pulev, they're already beating him. Zhang, slow as molasses, terrible stamina, but goddamn he can punch. And AJ, all it takes is one left hand or one right hook, and AJ is like Deontay Wilder. It's over. Moses Atelma ain't gonna be him. Jared Anderson, maybe. There was talk about that fight. There was a lot of talk about it. Frank Sanchez, fully fit Frank Sanchez. I think he outboxes AJ, to be honest. Back at Ear Jalala, ain't gonna happen. Justice Hoon, they're about Matchroom fighters, but I think he's a bit too awkward. Joe Joyce, I'd have AJ firmly over Joe Joyce now. That Nelson Heisa guy, the 40-year-old Albanian heavyweight who Frank Warren actually promotes, don't think that would do all those big numbers. Then we're going right down. Lorena, some of these guys I don't even know. I've never even seen. Guido Vianello, I think he's fighting pretty soon. Tony Yoka, that name is in there. So you get what I mean. Now you're really going down. Wilder is 30. Wilder and White, 35, 36. That's crazy. Jesus, that's crazy actually. When you think that's actually mad. But yeah, that is where we stand with AJ. So they're going to have a carefully selected opponent. So he says top 15, but carefully selected. So you know what I mean. It's probably not going to be. I don't begrudge him that though. I don't begrudge him that. He's coming in off the back of surgery and a devastating knockout defeat. So have a comeback fight. As for the Fury situation, the only way I would see Fury AJ happen is if Alexander Usyk retires. Because I think as long as Usyk's there, that's always going to want to be the fight Fury's going to want to go for. Because he can always tell himself, I got robbed twice. And he always uses that pathetic excuse of the conflict in Usyk. That's why they're giving it to him. No, it's because he's beating you from pillar to post. That's why they're giving it to him, Tyson Fury. If he fights AJ, and I would make him favourite over AJ, just why I don't understand it. I would make him firm favourite over Anthony Joshua. Firm favourite. I'd pick him every day of the week, just given the fact that Fury seems to have a little bit more left in the tank. If he fights AJ and loses, well then, I mean, what do? You can still try and, fool people into thinking, I'm still the second best heavyweight. I'm really the best, but, they just keep giving these fights to Alexander Usyk, you know what I mean? If you lose to AJ, well, that's gone then. And then what? People would be saying then, oh, gee, well, how good was Tyson Fury, And then people will probably look more into his resume, which is not stellar. AJ's resume is better, in my opinion. And there you go. You really would have people questioning. So I think the only way would be if Alexander Usyk, if he knows Fury, that Usyk fight is gone, and there's a big money fight there with Anthony Joshua, then I think he'd probably take it. But as long as Usyk is still around and he thinks there's a chance to get that trilogy fight, and the Saudis, the WBC would initiate it because they'll rank Fury number 1. The Saudis will love it, everyone love it because they make a boatload of cash doing the trilogy fight with Alexander Usyk. So as long as that's there, I think there's always going to be a risk that that's the fight Fury goes for, as opposed to AJ. If Usyk retires, which if we're talking about this time next year, I'd be very surprised if Usyk's still around in boxing anyway. Very surprised. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. AJ not fighting this year, but he will be fighting early next year against a carefully selected opponent with the goal of having a Fury fight in the summer of next year. I'd love to see it, but will it happen? Let me know your thoughts below in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. And until next time, peace.